An American Apache helicopter, one of the most lethal attack machines ever built, fell out of the sky and crashed into the Persian Gulf last night. 2 U.S. Army aviators were floating in the most dangerous 20 miles of salt water on the planet. Iranian fast attack boats were closing in, and the United States did not send a single human being to rescue them. It sent a robot. A drone boat controlled by artificial intelligence quietly slipped through the darkness, located both crew members, and pulled them out of Iran's front yard before the IRGC could even find their own dock. This is not science fiction. This happened on June 8, 2026, and it just changed the entire doctrine of naval warfare in ways that Tehran has not yet processed. But here is what makes this story even bigger. This rescue did not happen in isolation. It happened inside a 36-hour sequence of events that tells you exactly where this conflict is going. Israel and Iran traded strikes for the first time since the April 8th ceasefire. Iran fired missiles toward Israel. Israel answered by destroying one of Iran's primary ballistic missile chemical production facilities in western and central Iran. The ceasefire that Washington has been holding together with diplomatic pressure and military restraint is now cracking at every seam. And right in the middle of all of it, a U.S. Apache goes down into the Gulf, Iran smells a propaganda victory, and a robot boat steals it from them in 2 hours flat. This is the story of June 8th, and by the end of this video, you will understand why a drone boat rescue operation may be the single most strategically significant development of this entire conflict. Let us start with what actually happened and why the sequence of events in the 36 hours before the Apache crash matters completely. Rewind to Sunday. For the first time since the April 8th ceasefire, Iran fired ballistic missiles toward Israel. The trigger was Israeli airstrikes on Hezbollah positions in Beirut. Iran's answer was missiles toward Israeli territory. That exchange alone would have been the lead story on any other week. But Israel's response on Monday is what changed the operational picture. Israeli strikes hit a primary chemical production plant inside western and central Iran, the specific facility responsible for producing the propellant chemicals used in Iran's ballistic missile program. This is not a symbolic strike. Hitting a ballistic missile chemical plant degrades Iran's ability to manufacture and sustain the missile inventory that forms the backbone of its strategic deterrence. Iran's ballistic missile program just took a direct hit to its supply chain. This is the backdrop against which the Apache crash occurred. Monday evening, a U.S. Army AH-64 Apache was on patrol near the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Oman. This is standard operational tasking. Apaches are operating in this theater specifically to keep the strait functional for commercial shipping, to hunt Iranian fast attack boats, and to intercept drone swarms before they reach American naval assets. These are not joyrides. These are combat patrols inside the most contested sea lane on Earth right now. Mid-patrol, the aircraft went down into the water. U.S. Central Command confirmed crew recovery within approximately 2 hours. Both aviators were recovered in stable condition. Not a scratch. President Trump confirmed it directly. The pilots are fine, nobody injured. The cause remains under investigation. Now here's the question that every analyst and every IRGC commander is asking this morning. Did Iran shoot it down, or was it mechanical? Here is the honest answer. The Apache went down near Oman, which is on the southern side of the Strait of Hormuz, the opposite side from Iran's coastline. Iran's densest military capability is concentrated along its own northern coastline. That is where the minefields are. That is where the shore-based anti-ship missiles are positioned. That is where the IRGC Navy runs its mosquito fleet operations. Near Oman, on the southern approach, Iran's reach is significantly thinner. The probability of a successful Iranian shootdown in that specific location is low. A mechanical failure, engine ingestion of drone shrapnel, hydraulic failure, any number of combat environment maintenance factors is the more operationally logical explanation. But U.S. officials are investigating every possibility, including whether Iranian fire brought it down. That investigation will produce answers. What matters right now is what happened next. Because what happened next is the part that changes everything. Iran spent the entire night promising it would find the downed crew and deliver a decisive response. The IRGC announced it was hunting the aviators. Iranian state media framed it as a propaganda opportunity, the kind of hostage situation that Iran has used as negotiating leverage in every confrontation for 4 decades. American soldiers in Iranian hands at the negotiating table is a card Tehran would pay significant operational cost to acquire. The United States understood this completely, and it solved the problem with a robot. Task Force 59. If you do not know that name yet, remember it. Because after June 8, 2026, the world knows it. Task Force 59 is the U.S. Navy's dedicated unmanned systems and artificial intelligence task force operating out of 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. For years, this unit has been quietly seeding the Persian Gulf with robotic boats, autonomous underwater vehicles, and AI-driven surveillance platforms. The Lamprey, an undersea drone that can physically latch onto the hull of a vessel, track it back to its home port, and sit dormant on the seafloor for weeks before reactivating on command. The Manta Ray, a long-endurance underwater surveillance platform that can operate independently for weeks, collecting intelligence, passing targeting data, hunting threats while remaining completely undetected. These systems have been operating in the Gulf in near total secrecy. Iran knew something was watching. Iran did not know what or where. On the night of June 8th, Task Force 59 deployed a maritime drone boat into the operational area. The drone boat used artificial intelligence to locate the two downed aviators floating in open water after dark. It navigated through a strait ringed with Iranian fast attack craft, sea mines, shore-based anti-ship missiles, and one-way attack drones. It found the crew, it brought them home. No manned helicopter was put at risk. No boat full of sailors was sent into the engagement zone. No additional American lives were placed in danger. For the first time in recorded military history, U.S. forces have conducted an air-crew water rescue using a maritime drone. Read that sentence again, because the implications extend far beyond one rescue operation. The tactical problem that Task Force 59 solved on June 8th has been one of the fundamental vulnerabilities of manned naval operations in contested environments since the beginning of this conflict. When you put aircraft and ships into harm's way, you accept that some will go down. And when they go down, you face an immediate dilemma. Do you send more people into the same threat environment to recover them, accepting the possibility of a second loss or a second target for the enemy? Or do you accept that your people are on their own until the threat environment clears? Task Force 59 just removed that dilemma from the equation entirely. An unmanned rescue vehicle can operate in threat environments that would be unacceptable for manned assets. It does not have a crew to protect. It does not require air defense suppression before it can enter the area. It does not give Iran a second target or a second propaganda opportunity. It does not create the political crisis that American captives in IRGC hands would immediately generate at the negotiating table. It finds the crew, it brings them home. The only thing the United States risked to pull two aviators out of Iran's front yard was metal, code, and the electricity to run the motors. Iran brought its mosquito fleet to hunt the downed crew. The US brought a boat that drives itself. The IRGC did not reach the aviators first. The robot did, by 2 hours. Now consider what comes next, because the rescue operation is only the beginning of what Task Force 59's drone boat capability means for this conflict. The IRGC's primary tactical doctrine in the Strait of Hormuz is the mosquito fleet strategy. 500-plus fast attack craft, small fiberglass-hulled boats designed to operate in swarms, approaching American naval assets from multiple simultaneous vectors to overwhelm defensive systems through sheer numbers. The logic is numerical saturation. No single defensive system can engage 500 simultaneous threats. Send enough boats from enough directions, and something gets through. This doctrine has been partially degraded by Apache helicopters operating at low altitude over the strait. The Apache's Hellfire missiles engage fast attack boats at ranges beyond the boat's own weapons. The Apache hunts the lead elements of a swarm before they can close to weapons range. The boats behind the lead watch the boats in front go to the bottom and reassess. But Apaches are manned. Apaches can be shot down. Apaches require pilots. Apaches create the rescue problem that Task Force 59 just solved for the first time. Now answer this question. What happens when Task Force 59 deploys armed drone boats in sufficient numbers to contest Iran's mosquito fleet directly? A drone boat armed with directed energy weapons or machine guns operating from a base in Oman, UAE, or Qatar does not have a crew to protect. It does not need air defense suppression before it can enter the threat zone. It can operate continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without crew fatigue, without crew rotation, without the logistical tail that manned operations require. A swarm of armed drone boats can contest Iran's mosquito fleet numerically, boat for boat, swarm for swarm, without putting a single American life in the engagement zone. Iran built its mosquito fleet doctrine around the assumption that the asymmetric cost was in its favor. Small, cheap boats against expensive manned naval assets creates a cost imposition that eventually becomes politically unsustainable for Washington. The same cost logic that made the drone swarm a strategic threat to American naval operations applies directly to the mosquito fleet doctrine. Task Force 59's drone boats remove that cost asymmetry. A robot boat costs significantly less to operate than a manned vessel. It does not require health insurance, combat pay, or casualty notifications to families. When it gets destroyed, it is replaced with hardware and code, not a flag-draped coffin. The IRGC's mosquito fleet just found its counter, a system built on the same numerical logic, operating in the same threat environment at a fraction of the human cost. But here is the strategic dimension that goes beyond the hardware. The rescue operation on June 8th confirmed to the Iranian leadership something that changes their threat assessment calculations entirely. The United States has autonomous maritime systems operating in the Strait of Hormuz right now. Not experimental, not developmental, operational. Performing real missions under real threat conditions with real results. The Lamprey sitting on the seafloor tracking IRGC vessel movements. The Manta Ray collecting intelligence in waters Iran believes it controls. The drone boat that just pulled 2 American soldiers out of Iran's territorial neighborhood before the IRGC could intercept them. Iran thought it controlled the information environment inside the strait. Task Force 59 has been watching everything Iran does in those waters for years. Every fast attack boat patrol, every mine-laying operation, every drone launch, every command vessel movement. The IRGC has been operating under surveillance it did not know existed. That changes the Iranian command picture at exactly the moment when Iranian leadership is making decisions about whether to escalate or accept a deal. Now let us talk about the adversary picture, because understanding what Iran still has and what it has lost tells you where this conflict goes next. Iran's military capability near the Omani coast is demonstrably thin. The evidence is in Iran's own mine-laying strategy. The IRGC released navigation maps to commercial mariners showing a minefield that forces vessel traffic northward up close to the Iranian coastline. Think about why they would do that. You publish a minefield warning that drives all traffic toward your own coast because that is where your fast attack boats are concentrated. That is where your shore-based anti-ship missiles are positioned. That is where your radar coverage is densest. You force the ships toward your guns because your guns cannot reach the ships if they stay on the southern approach. Iran's Mosquito fleet is built for the northern sector of the strait. The IRGC Navy runs swarm operations most effectively in the confined water close to its own coastline, where it has logistics support, rapid reinforcement, and the ability to mass numbers quickly. On the southern approach near Oman, Iran's reach extends but thins dramatically. The Apache went down in the one sector where Iran's ability to exploit the situation was at its weakest. The drone boat operated in the one sector where Iranian interference was least likely to be effective. What Iran still has is significant. Ballistic missile inventories that U.S. intelligence assessed at approximately 70% of pre-war stockpiles before Operation Epic Fury began its systematic degradation campaign. Mobile launchers that require different targeting approaches than fixed infrastructure because they can reposition between launches. Shahed drone stockpiles stored in civilian-adjacent facilities specifically to complicate American targeting decisions. Shore-based anti-ship missile batteries in hardened positions along the northern coast that have survived the precision strike campaign to varying degrees. What Iran has lost is the coordinated command infrastructure that made these capabilities work as a system rather than as individual weapons operating independently. The strikes on Bandar Abbas, Qeshm Island, Minab, and Bandar Kamir that preceded this rescue operation removed the command headquarters, the logistics hub, the dispatch coordination center, and the Eastern Access Control node from Iran's Hormuz harassment architecture. Individual weapons remain. The organizational brain that coordinated those weapons into a doctrine-level threat has been degraded severely. Now let us talk about the 4D chess strategic picture. Because what Iran's leadership is actually processing right now tells us what happens in the next 72 hours. Iran's response to the Apache crash was the response of an institution that has been stripped of its most effective options and is left performing information operations. The promise to hunt the downed crew. The assertion that Iranian forces would deliver a decisive response. The claim, which appeared almost immediately on Iranian state media, that the Apache had been shot down by Iranian air defenses. That claim serves a domestic audience that has been sealed from external information for over 2 months. For an Iranian population living under information blackout, the claim that air defenses shot down an American helicopter provides the psychological narrative that the regime needs to sustain the story of continued effective resistance. The operational reality that a U.S. robot boat recovered both crew members before the IRGC could locate them is not a narrative that serves this purpose. So Iranian state media does not tell it. But here's the strategic problem for Tehran. The drone boat rescue is not a story that can be effectively suppressed in the Iranian information environment when its implications become clear to IRGC commanders. The senior IRGC naval officers who watched a U.S. autonomous vessel operate freely in the strait while their Mosquito fleet failed to intercept it understand what they saw. They do not need CNN to tell them that the United States just demonstrated a capability they had not fully accounted for in their operational planning. The IRGC's strategic calculations have 3 pillars. Control the strait through numerical superiority of the Mosquito fleet. Sustain economic pressure through disruption of commercial shipping. Use American casualties and captives as negotiating leverage at the diplomatic table. Task Force 59 just attacked all 3 pillars simultaneously. The drone boat demonstrated that the Mosquito fleet numerical advantage can be countered with unmanned systems. The continued American naval presence demonstrates that commercial shipping disruption is being contained by a force posture that is operationally effective. And the recovery of both aviators before the IRGC could intercept them eliminated the hostage leverage option in real time. The 14-point diplomatic framework currently on the table includes pausing Iranian enrichment for 12 to 15 years in exchange for gradual blockade relaxation and sanctions relief. Iran cannot accept terms that make the regime look weak domestically. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said publicly, "This war is not our war, the United States started it." The domestic political performance of strength is not optional for a regime whose hold on power depends on the perception that the IRGC remains capable and effective. June 8th made that performance harder to sustain. Not because of the Apache loss, the regime will spin that as a victory indefinitely. Because of what caught the crew. Because of what Iran did not know was operating in the strait. because of what that drone boat represents in terms of American autonomous systems capability that the IRGC has not developed a counter to. The nihilistic faction inside IRGC leadership, hardliners who declared that any agreement was far removed from reality and who directed the coordinated strikes on American destroyers during the ceasefire, is now processing a rescue operation that removed their best leverage opportunity of the conflict with a robot boat. The deterrence reading of June 8th says the following: every escalation produces 0 hits against American targets and further degradation of Iranian infrastructure and doctrine. The drone boat rescue proved that even when an American asset goes down, the U.S. can recover its people without creating additional targets or vulnerabilities. The cost of continued escalation falls entirely on the Iranian side. Sign the deal before the other hand comes out. The escalation reading says the following: the Apache going down proves American systems are vulnerable. The IRGC's capacity to impose costs continues to exist even if specific operations have not produced the desired results. The regime's survival requires demonstrating continued resistance. The deal terms remain unacceptable. The IRGC's institutional track record in this conflict does not favor the deterrence reading. The faction currently in operational control has escalated at every decision point where diplomacy offered a less costly alternative. The pattern is not ambiguous, which means the next Iranian move arrives before the diplomatic window fully reopens. And Task Force 59's drone boats will be watching when it does. Now let us turn to the global roundup, because while the Strait of Hormuz dominated the operational picture on June 8th, 2 other developments demand attention. In the Taiwan Strait, the Dutch Navy frigate HNLMS De Ruyter completed a transit of the strait and was shadowed throughout by Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy vessels. This is the latest in a pattern of behavior that saw more than 200 Chinese military aircraft enter Taiwan's air defense identification zone in a single month, last month alone. Taiwan's government responded not with a diplomatic protest, but with a practical decision: a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar special defense budget, specifically for purchasing American weapons systems. Read that sequence carefully. China shadows a NATO warship without firing. Taiwan responds by accelerating its American arms procurement. This is not Taiwan panicking. This is Taiwan reading the operational environment correctly and responding with the logical countermeasure. The shadowing operation that China conducts as a demonstration of control normalizes Chinese military presence in waters that Beijing claims. Taiwan's arms procurement accelerates precisely because the normalization campaign is working, and Taiwan understands that the window for acquiring deterrent capability before a crisis arrives is finite. The second story is hypersonics. DARPA and the U.S. Air Force are developing a reusable hypersonic strike aircraft designed to exceed Mach 5, penetrate advanced integrated air defense systems, strike targets, and return to base for reuse. The critical word is reusable. Every previous generation of hypersonic strike capability has been single-use, fire the weapon, expend the asset, require resupply. A reusable hypersonic strike aircraft changes the economics of deep strike operations the same way directed energy changes the economics of drone intercepts. The per strike cost collapses because the platform comes home. There is an active debate inside the Pentagon about whether an unmanned version of this platform should replace the crewed F-47 entirely. The logic is not complicated. Remove the human pilot and the airframe can sustain acceleration loads exceeding 50 Gs, far beyond the biological tolerance of any crew. A hypersonic unmanned strike aircraft pulling 50 Gs through an evasive approach profile is essentially uninterceptable by any current air defense system. The fighter pilot versus unmanned systems debate that this development forces is real and significant. But what matters operationally in the current conflict is the direction of travel. The drone boat pulled Americans out of the water. The directed energy laser shoots down drones for the cost of electricity. The reusable hypersonic platform eliminates the resupply constraint on deep strike capability. The operational picture is moving systematically toward a U.S. force posture, where the cost asymmetry advantages that Iran's doctrine was built to exploit simply no longer exist. Iran built its Strait of Hormuz control doctrine around 3 cost asymmetry calculations: drone swarms exhausting expensive interceptor inventories, mosquito fleet numerical saturation overwhelming manned defensive systems, hostage and casualty leverage creating domestic political pressure in Washington for accommodation. Directed energy eliminated the first calculation. Task Force 59's drone boats are in the process of eliminating the second. The June 8th rescue operation eliminated the third in real time, live, before the IRGC could capitalize on it. What remains of Iran's strategic position is the nuclear program, the ultimate regime survival guarantee that Tehran has been pursuing for decades, and the ballistic missile inventory whose mobile launchers complicate but do not prevent American targeting. The 14-point framework currently under negotiation addresses the nuclear program directly. The question is whether the nihilistic faction that controls the IRGC's operational decisions will accept terms that require pausing enrichment, or whether it will escalate toward the capability that it believes makes the regime untouchable. The drone boat found the crew first. The robot won the race against the mosquito fleet. 2 American soldiers are home because the United States sent a machine into Iran's front yard and took back what belonged to it before Tehran could process what was happening. Somewhere in the bunkers where IRGC senior commanders are making their next operational decisions, the analysts are explaining what Task Force 59 is, what the Lamprey does, what the Manta Ray has been collecting, how long these systems have been operating in waters the IRGC thought it controlled. The next move belongs to the nihilistic faction. The drone boats are charged. The Apaches are on station. The F-35s are on the ramp. And the robot that pulled 2 Americans out of the Gulf of Oman last night is already back in the water. What do you think happens next? Does the IRGC escalate again? Or does June 8th finally move the needle toward a deal? Share your analysis in the comments. Subscribe to PPR Global and turn on notifications. We cover this conflict every day as it develops, with the analysis that connects the tactical events to the strategic picture you need to understand.